I've been fickling around with that for like a minute, like what to name it, and start recording. Yeah, I've been playing around with the name, and I don't know. There's like so many words you can pick to name stuff, and you know what I mean? And so last night I was actually texting with my mom because I've been really like pressing myself the past 3 weeks every day. Like, you got to come up with a name because then you got to like subscribe to everything. Yeah. So I kind of feel like things are held back from that. Yeah. And a friend last week, she was like, stop with the technicals. Yeah. Just record shit. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? You're right.
Yeah. Let it come out organically.
Let it come out organically. So last night I got back on the technical side of it, and I'm like, shoot, I really need to figure out what this name is. You know, I came up with Rest Assured. I don't know, but you know, Rest Assured. It's like something is true or something's gonna happen. And you know, I sent that to my mom. We were going back and forth. And then, you know, I have this name, Miles Allen, which people really like. And they're like, that sounds like an author's name or an actor's name, you know. And, you know, I'm looking at other people's channels, and some people just name their channel their name. Yeah. And I think, you know, for me, it's like I've been being shy or like shrinking away or like wanting to hide behind.
Yeah, not step into your authenticity and be, you know, because people will say that, you know, you got to be humble, and that's but there is, you know, ego is part of our spirituality. There has to be some ego to get in there. You have to be proud of yourself, and that's where everything starts from, you know.
Facts. And yeah, I you know, got into Christianity early on, and humility was like a key pillar of that practice. And so I merged accidentally humility with with low self-esteem because they didn't teach it properly. Yeah. And if you just tell like late teenagers or early 20-year-olds like you need to be humble, like
you need to tone it down, bro.
All I know is just like, then don't be confident in yourself. Yeah. And it wasn't until my mid-20s that I discovered that I hardwired those two concepts together. And so I had this whole journey of like coming out of self-loathing and low self-esteem and actually finding real humility. Yeah. That wasn't about putting myself down. Yeah.
Which is more into humanity, compassion, unself-consciousness, which, you know, is more of this gratitude, this giving and you get back, which is not a defeating sort of modality to be in.
No, for sure. And then you have, you know, all the talk about ego. And I had a pretty mind-wiping, ego-wiping, you know, series of ceremonies. One summer, maybe 4 summers ago, 3 summers ago. And yeah, I like lost all sense of self and ego, you know. And just now, I mean, this manifestation is actually you seeing me recover ego. Yeah. And recover it in the most healthiest way I've known. Coming from humility means low self-esteem, right? And I'm like, I have to have an ego to like show up every day. Yeah. And this is like the ego that you're seeing.
What gets me in the shower?
Yeah. You know? What can get me on a podcast? For sure. So yeah. So anyway, so we're going through the names, and I was like, well, if I use Miles Allen's, you know, channel or the Miles Allen Show or Miles Allen Podcast, I was like, that seems so bold. And my mom's like, be bold.
I like it. I do like it.
So I was like settled. I was like, fine, let's keep it simple, keep it straightforward. Miles Allen, whatever. Yeah. You know.
And then people know what they're looking for. They're not looking for a name. They're not, it's this with Miles Allen.
No.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. And enough people know me, and you know, it's about discovering, you know, me and my guests. So anyways, a big intention of this channel, the podcast, the situation is, you know, I come across a lot of interesting people, and I'm always wanting to highlight or amplify other people's wisdoms, Because a lot of wisdoms that I have or knowledge is from coming across people like you.
Yeah.
And we haven't spent all that much time together. I mean,
no, it's been in the gym and it's in between lifts and it's like,
yeah, sweating and dying and encouraging each other through that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is Jimmy.
Hey, y'all. My name's Jimmy.
Jimmy from the gym.
Yes. I guess, do you mind if I pray us in?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Let's have a moment of silence to acknowledge God's presence in the room. God, we invite you into this room to guide and direct each of us as we seek your truth. Father, Sky Daddy, Sky Mama, Krishna, Atman, Jesus, Buddha, Allah, Brahman, High Finance, Capital F, Friend, Boss Universal, Creative Intelligence of the Universe, Czar of the Heavens, the Great Mystery, Capital R, Reason, the space between, Sky Diddly Doo, Dorothy, and your little dog too. Whatever mouth noise you adhere to or really grinds your gears, please set aside within each of us that which would block us off from the truth. Lay aside our prejudice about what we think we know about this podcast, any other podcast, how I process, how you process. Finding a way out of something you've never been in. Where do I, you, me, we begin? In the game and at the game are not the same. Relax and release. Let all fighting cease. Translation or transition or ego's interpretation of a spiritual condition. Remove our fears, Lord, that we may hear your truth through the members and the guests on this podcast. Give us the strength and courage to share your truth with each other in a real spirit of love and compassion for our fellow humans. A mother bleeping N. And that's something that's come out of 12-step recovery. I've been in recovery for 21 years, 10 consecutive. I fell off for a little bit. And I needed that. Like in 2003, I got sober. In the 90s, I was running crazy. But I had this, it was more of a search for a spiritual outlet. I got into life and was kind of like, I'm standing still and the world's going on around me. And I'm just like, what is actually going on here? Do I need to work 5 days just so that I can get 2? And I'm seeing all these people do this. I'm skateboarding. I got skateboard shops and skateboard parks and stuff, and I'm in this flow state, and I'm feeling these different things and I'm seeing these other people live these different lives and hating what they're doing, and I'm like, there's got to be more to this, and what started out as a search for, kind of what, dabbling in these different things, ketamine, marijuana, alcohol. Did that for a long time and ended up having a baby in getting somebody pregnant in 1999 and having a baby in 2000, and all that stuff went to the wayside. But kind of pharmaceutical stuff came in as I grew a business called Alchemy Studios, where I was painting murals and doing faux finish in Hilton Head. I had a doctor that was giving me Ritalin. And I kept saying, I think I'm physically addicted to this Ritalin. And she said, no, you just need more. So she kept giving me more. And I could feel that I was physically addicted to it. That stuff started to come on. But I was the artist. I was the billing. I was getting the jobs. I was doing all this stuff. And I was making 6 figures. And it was just coming in just hand over fist. And I didn't know really how to handle it. And it got to a point where I was like, I got to check myself into rehab. My wife at the time, my then wife, did not like how that medicine made me. I was pretty much gone for 6 days and asleep for 1 day, and it was like every week we were making good money, but it's like, this kind of has to stop. But, 3 days into recovery, into rehab, I felt wonderful. That stuff was out of my system. And, I got into 12-step recovery, started sponsoring people, working around, because I didn't need really a spiritual solution. I just needed that stuff out of my system. It wasn't till later getting divorced and having a crisis that I couldn't manage that I had to reach for something else. And I had somebody during this divorce thing tell me these magical words, alcohol wasn't your problem. And I was like, oh my God. And I went.
Thank you to that person.
Yes, I went to the bar, and I'm sitting there, and there's women around, and there's people, and there's laughter, and I took that drink. No lightning hit. And I was put in the monocle, put on the top hat, and we were off to the races for a little bit. Started drinking and got out of that 12-step recovery stuff, and my divorce just kept getting harder and harder, and it was kind of a competition between me and her, and it's like, if I take away this drinking, that's the only thing that she has that she could hold against me. And I just had this click, and it was just this booming voice, this thing. I checked myself into rehab again, a couple days in, I was all good, bring my bags to the front. You've all been great. But, my skin's cleared up. I'm sexy again. You all can let me out. And they're like, you're the only person in here that doesn't realize that you're an alcoholic. And I was like, and at that point, I could see, like, the dust had cleared. Tyler Durden was gone. He wasn't selling me on ideas of Project Mayhem, that somebody else was doing it, that I was chasing around. I realized that all of these things that had happened in my life were my fault. And I was the only person that could solve it. And it was like, once I got to that point where I realized that problems were coming from me rather than at me, I had this spiritual experience. I had this thing, and all that stuff was just lifted. I had a spiritual experience because of that. It woke to this new thing, that I started to seek spiritually, not through medicine, not through alcohol, not through drugs or anything like that, and started to have this new experience with recovery. And recovery is not everybody's experience. I think that people have a crisis eventually in their lives, this existential crisis. And, whether it be a midlife crisis and I got to buy a new car to kind of fill this in, and that doesn't do it. Maybe this will do it. And it's always this and this and this, and it's that next thing. And the thing was, alcoholics kind of get a bad name, and I kind of want to normalize sobriety, but it's kind of like my skin didn't fit early, and some people fit into their skin pretty good,
Sure.
And so we kind of take the front stage at Life-a-Palooza, because we can fucking ruin a wedding by ourselves and not remember it, because, we drink like that and destroy stuff,
Right.
and we don't understand how it's killing the people around us.
Sure.
and other things like that. But yeah, I started to realize as being in this program longer and longer that most people this is a human condition.
Yeah.
My body, it's exacerbated by an allergic reaction to alcohol that makes me want to have more of it. That makes me want to party harder. And when I took
relate.
a lot of those vacation homes, as I'll call them, party enhancers and stuff that kind of kept the drinking going on. When I took those away and it was just alcohol, that stuff really crushed down on me really hard, and I had no escape plans. I had no places to go. It started to physically challenge me. I started to feel it, at work and stuff, and it started to show up in different ways that I needed to put that in my body to feel okay. And I thought, maybe putting more poison would kill or take out my ex-wife or something, but the more I put in, the worse I got, and it was not helping. It wasn't helping me father. It wasn't helping me. None of this stuff, the solution ended up not being the solution anymore. It started to be the problem, and it was not helping me with any of that stuff. So, I got into this recovery, and man, I just skyrocketed at meetings and stuff. This great guy that in Savannah, Georgia, that's where I'm from. He sounded like a guy I met in 2009. I was up in at the ACA convention, which is Cocaine Anonymous, and somebody at an NA convention said, "You want to hear the dope shit?" He said, "You got to go up to this place." And I hear this guy. This guy comes and sits down next to me, grabs me on the knee. He goes, "How we doing?" I said, "I'm a little bit frightened, but I'm doing okay." And he sat and put his arm around me, guy gets up on stage and does a keynote speak and talks about God in a way that I've never heard anybody talk. Blew me away. It was like a Max L commercial, man. I was just sitting, just like trying to hold on. That guy passed away in 2013 before I had gotten sober again. And this guy that I had met in Savannah sounded just like him.
Oh, wow.
And I said, I need you to be my sponsor. And he goes, I'm full right now, but I got a guy right over here that can do it for you. And he sponsored me kind of as this guy went through the stuff, but has always been a part of my life since then. So 2014, this guy's been guiding me through. And then when COVID hit, it was like, oh my God, now you're going to take away my solution. You're closing up all these rooms. And all of a sudden this Zoom thing happened. And I started to connect with people all over the world. Started to do talks in India, started to do talks in Great Britain, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, all over the place. And then I started to do travel to places to go talk, to New York, to Vegas, to out to LA, talking in front of 100 people in LA, trying to speak over the traffic and stuff. And now I have this network of people that's just like all over the place.
Ooh,
and I
love that.
And in COVID, I kind of had these feelings and these other things that were going on, and I didn't have language. I didn't have a vocabulary for it. And I had a guy that's my friend now, whose name is Kurt, talk with another lady, Mary, and they used vocabulary that brought everything. I had this second awakening.
That's huge.
That just the harmonics and the resonancy of those words, to have a vocabulary for the things that I was feeling inside of me.
That's huge. Like I totally relate on the journey and even yours, going from teacher to teacher, let's just call it that, but really it is language to language. It's concepts to concepts. And as your kind of experience grows, you need more lexicon. You need more words. And I love your kind of journey. And I certainly relate to coming in contact with teachers or different thinkers who gave me language. And I'm like, that's what I was feeling or experiencing or sensing or growing into words even. Like, here's a concept and it's like, takes me a year or 2 or 5 years to wrap my head around that concept or learn that concept. You had said a couple things that I wanted to highlight or maybe investigate. But one was you had an epiphany that you realized everything was your fault and that life wasn't happening to you. But there's a sort of reverberation from you to life in a feedback loop. The next thing I would love to get into would be, I have this take on intoxication or addiction, rather. That you may or may not have heard or may not have thought of before. And I haven't, I don't know if I could classify myself as an addict, but I've certainly done my fair share of patterns and behaviors and obsessions. But I always tend to sober myself up from things. My biological father is an alcoholic, and his dad, my grandpa, is an alcoholic, and I suspect that my great grandpa was. And it could be cultural, right? And so I kind of was aware of that growing up. Now, I didn't meet my biological father until I was 26, 27. So I wasn't influenced by that, but I knew it was potentially in my blood. And certainly when I started drinking at a young age, it affected me differently than other people, is what I noticed.
But how do you know? Because the way I drink's the way I drink. It feels this way in my body. Why is it not feeling that way in somebody else's body?
Or you assuming it's everyone's having your experience, and you're like, oh, this is what it is. And so, I've never gotten heavy into any hard drugs, thank God, and at least that just wasn't my path. And I've sobered up from alcohol and things, year after year, just kind of initiating my own sobriety as like a really precautionary. I remember I became a born-again Christian at 17 and became sober. And before that, I had done everything, was trying everything. And I was just talking about this the other day to a guy who's maybe like 28 days sober, and he messaged me just to share that, and I was congratulating him, and I was like, yeah, I went sober at 17, and he's like, that's so young.
Yeah.
But I remember my freshman year of high school when I was maybe 15, I had drank every day for 3 months in a row. And it was like going to bed just spinning and not being able to fall asleep. And I remember thinking, I got to quit this. Yeah. And I quit everything. And then when I turned 21, following the Christian rules, it was like obey the law of the land. So I was like, oh, well, when I'm 21, I can start drinking. And it was right when craft beer started coming out, like Blue Moon and Shock Top was like the head of that thing. But I was like, oh, I'll just buy a new craft beer each week, and like kind of began to already mask my alcoholism as like a, craft beer connoisseur kind of thing.
Yeah, hip thing to do.
Yeah. But then I told myself, if you drink more than 4 days a week, then you have to quit.
Yeah.
And it took maybe a month and a half. And I was drinking 4 days a week, and I was like, all right. So I went sober to like 21 to maybe 25.
Yeah.
Then drank and partied for a few years and became sober. And that's kind of my pattern.
Yeah.
But I certainly, I'm interested and invested in people who are addicted to things. I mean, I've been surrounded by a lot of people. I'm not surrounded, but I've befriended people, who have had various addictions, and I know my handful of people who've had overdoses. So yeah. It's to the most serious degree in my life, but I have my own sort of takes on what this thing is, right? And I love how your journey of wrestling with it, and someone saying alcohol is not your problem, and you go and do alcohol, and I love that journey, and it's still even in all of the anonymous groups, we're still wrestling with something. There's still like, what are we really grappling with? And here's one of my takes.
Yes.
Okay. I believe we all have a right to get intoxicated. And by that, I mean to get out of our minds. Mm-hmm. We all have a human right to step out of the stress body from the weekly work, and out of the stress mind from a stressful family or your tribe or village or society, right? Mm-hmm. We have a right to alter the state of our mind, and it essentially like have a recess, to escape, right? Yeah. And so I love looking at like ancient societies and cultures, right? Because what they did is time tested, and they solved all the problems of humanity. And so one thing we see a lot of is like drumming and dancing, and even like mask wearing, which is something that appears on every continent and all cultures. And so it was investigating like, what are these mask rituals that Europeans did and Africans did and Native Americans did, and what are these like dances that go on for hours and hours and hours, right? And meeting different people and asking about their culture and doing my own reading and researching. But all of it's like to alter the state of mind.
Yeah.
It's essentially like a shot of heroin.
Yeah.
It's essentially like getting drunk. It's all the things that we as a human are aiming for, that in our traditional societies or, our more ancient cultures, they had embedded in the operations of the culture moments where you could get out of your mind, you can get out of your stress body. And now you come to this 21st century American culture, and we don't have much good relief for people seeking an altered state. And now one side of it is you feel stressed, so you need to escape. The other side of it, and I suspect this is your archetype, is that you're an adventure seeker, right? And so a lot of people who are seeking to alter their state of consciousness or alter their state of being is really kind of trying to explore the human mind or explore the human experience. And so that's why I think a lot of adrenaline junkies or, just adventurous people end up addicted to things because they're so bored out of their mind.
Yeah.
And they want to alter it. And I think we have a right to alter it. But, last thing I'll say to this is just one of my life's work I would want to be, and what I hope to see is more outlets for all of us to alter our states of minds in a very organic, natural way.
Yeah. Well, whether that be through meditation, plant medicine, ceremonies, bhakti.
CrossFit.
CrossFit, yoga.
That's real.
Yeah.
Yeah, altering my state of mind in CrossFit is very real.
When your soul leaves your body and this uncomfortable gym floor becomes the most comfortable spot you've ever laid in your life, and then your soul comes back into your body as the endorphins hit your head, with the serotonin, everything, and you're like, I want to do that again.
Yeah. And for me, it was like always reaching a point in class where I'm like, I can't move or go any further.
That voice comes in.
Yeah.
And salesman.
then I learned like,
done enough.
Just shut that voice off. And then next thing I know, I'm moving. And I'm out of my mind.
Yeah.
And I'm just moving. And it's so freeing.
Yeah.
And you can do that through going out clubbing and dancing or ecstatic dance or meditation. And it was really funny and surprising to find these things that I found in more like spiritual hippie practices in the CrossFit gym. I was like, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
get it where you can get it.
Yoga is the same way. I did power yoga for a long time. A registered yoga teacher. I started to get to a point where I started to like have a following, and people wanted to come to my class. And the guy that is my grand sponsor is like, you got to stop teaching. And I was like, what are you talking about? You got to stop teaching. He's like, no,
Jimmy has that cult leader or
start building up. I'm doing this, these people are, and it was, it's 90% women. I had a girlfriend at the time. So how much attention am I paying to her?
It's the eyes. Yeah.
So, I got to a point where I was assisting after that, and it was like, that was a whole different way of working and connecting with other people. I think a lot of the exploration of consciousness is that connection that is what all of this is, that we aren't separate people. When we get to be about 3 years old, mine, and I start to identify as the Jimmy thing. Yeah. And I start to separate myself from you. And the only thing separating us is the space between. And in art, they would call it negative space. I think it's a bad word for it. But you take away all of the space between.
In Japan, they call it ma.
Do they?
Yeah. I dove into this a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's what they would call negative space, but it's ma. And in a lot of Japanese houses or spaces or even art, there's like tons of space with maybe one brush stroke in the middle.
Yeah.
And they really appreciate ma.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. And the space between, you take away the space between, and we're all connected.
Yeah.
And I would say that the space between has pretty much everything that we're built of. This atoms and energy moving. It's just at a less dense thing, and it's bouncing off me in this. So if you take the letters of the alphabet, and they mean nothing really individually, but arranged in a certain way, it can be poetry, it can be horror. But so if I arrange these atoms and stuff in a certain way, it's a Jimmy thing.
Sure.
In another way, it's a Miles thing.
Sure.
In another way, it's a table, and they're just vibrating just much quicker. And it's this field of electricity that we're all moving on, where the things are particle in their phase, and they're moving in and out of existence, and to start to understand it at that level. Is it consciousness? Is it quantum that comes from behind there?
This is like such a good kind of area of focus. I was in a conversation just the other day about like, do we transcend like the Buddha, or are we to involve ourselves in the stories and the dramas of this planet?
Yeah. Materialism or spiritual.
Yeah. And, I was kind of calling upon the middle way.
Yeah.
It's like certainly we're not just supposed to go to the mountaintop or the cave or the monastery and check out. However, if you need to do that as a coping mechanism, do it for a time. But to try to transcend, I think, forever the human experience. And then on the other hand, if you get too involved or carried away in the human dramas, it like nearly can kill you or destroy you.
It puts you to sleep to what's spiritually going on.
Sure.
And I mean, this whole world has groggy stickers all over it. You know, the little groggy sticker they used to have on prescriptions, the little dizzy eyes and stuff. It's got like Instagram, you know, new cars, these different things. I need a Aston Martin. I need Lululemon clothes. I need this sort of thing. And then that will be the thing. And as long as you're distracting me with these things that I need to keep purchasing, as long as I'm trying to keep up with the Joneses, as long as my picket fence is the right color white, life is going to be perfect.
So I even frame these things as extensions of drugs.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same behavior.
Absolutely.
Right? And so it's like you're either, in my opinion, kind of shrinking or you're expanding. Mm-hmm. You know, you're either like escaping or you're being present.
Yeah.
And in all ways and shapes and forms, we have a right to do any one at any point in time.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, like if you need to numb out and zone out through shopping and materialism, like I've had my seasons where I do that, and it's a tool, you know, it's like
retail therapy.
Yeah. You know, it's like I could just like get a drinking habit, but it's like, so it's like, in my own journey, having grace and kind of understanding, oh, when am I needing to, like this TV, like I've never owned a TV or have had a TV in my life up until I moved to this apartment, you know, a year ago.
Yeah.
And I got into TV. I was off grid for 4 years and a year, you know, living under the stars and the moonlight. And so to have a TV, I got into TV and I was like, oh, this is what TV is. And, you know, you come home from work and you put that episode on that halfway makes you numb. And without judging it, I was just like, this is the season I'm in. We're in TV season.
Yeah.
And it was like a nice, relaxing thing. But, you know, I think if you're a spirit and a soul that's kind of rolling and moving, you don't stay in any one thing for very long. And your journey is a testament to that. I mean, you are constantly moving through, you know, using things to learning things to, you know, and that I think is, you know, not to put anybody's journey on a hierarchy. If you watch TV for 50 years, that's where you're at.
Yeah.
You know, but I love to kind of move through things and feel the benefits of everything. But
absolutely. I mean, it's you can get locked into that TV thing. There were a lot of people, COVID just being an example. Just the language used around COVID was essential, non-essential. You know, we started to separate people, and we had people that, you know, went straight to the TVs, went to Netflix, and were burning out series left and right, just putting food into their body. You know, this food that we have, that the longer it stays on the shelf, the worse it is for you. Mm-hmm. You know, and you're not allowed to go anywhere. You can go outside if you're exercising. Well, I was one of the people that was outside exercising. You know, and I'd run across these people. I broke up with a girl right before COVID and was out on a running path and saw her maybe a year later. I was like, oh my Lord, like the pod that you were in was not good. And she had understood that she had started to use food as a drug. That was one of the things that she used, which, you know, is extremely difficult when that's something that you have to put into your body to have a healthy relationship with food.
Yeah, I can't eat sweets.
Yeah,
I mean, I just have to stay away. But I know that about myself.
Yeah, I don't do sugar. I'm hypoglycemic, so it has a different effect in my body. I can't metabolize it, so I'll just start talking. I'll go crazy, run around the room about 40 times, and then fall asleep and get grumpy.
You know, I was in the country. I was in southern Missouri, deep in southern Missouri, when COVID hit, and no restaurants shut down. The lumberyard didn't shut down. Yep. I honestly felt no effects of COVID, and at that point, I had only visited the city once every couple months, and it usually was just visiting friends' houses. I didn't do public things up here.
Yeah.
So man, I didn't really notice it until I moved up or visited a little bit longer, and so it's kind of interesting for me because, you know, a lot of people were in an urban environment or suburban environment, and being in a country environment, we hardly felt. I saw it through memes and stuff coming through online, but I didn't viscerally feel it. Yeah. And, you know, in a fortunate way, well, I will say we had sweat lodges, monthly sweat lodges that stopped, and then we had these monthly different medicine ceremonies that stopped. So I did feel that, and that was quite a great effect. And I was really surprised that the lockdown reached these very deeply spiritual practices that even us as a spiritual community or health community, like we decided to do that. I don't know. It was very hard and conflicting for me.
I think that decision was pushed on people, that you couldn't have people in close proximity, or you were going to have to pay a fine. Because some of the silent retreat places down in Georgia and stuff that I like to go to, those closed down because you couldn't be in close proximity. Who's gonna tell?
Man,
silent retreat.
For better or for worse, it certainly disrupted traditions.
Yeah,
and I remember when it really hit me was a picture of the Vatican on this one Easter day that for 2,000 years has been filled with people.
Yeah,
was probably the first, Vatican ceremony in 2,000 years that it wasn't filled with people, and that's I think when it clicked for me that it was a global lockdown. Now, rest was needed.
Yeah,
for all of us.
Yeah,
the hustle and the bustle, and I think the greatest benefit was this pause.
Yeah,
and I don't know if you learned about that. The scientists called it the anthropause, where like all of these like wild populations of animals boomed during the lockdown. So fish populations, bird populations, and I'm a beekeeper. I'm a beekeeper of 13 years, and every year there's like swarms that come off from hives and trees or your own bee yard. And I had like the most swarm calls, caught the most swarms, and we saw the most swarms from beehives like that year across the nation. And I thought that was kind of a cool effect, but it was an anthropause. And so, with the less car pollution, less humans out and about, these animal populations rebounded, and it gave science a lot to think about. The quick swiftness of the healing of the earth when we just like take a moment to stop.
Yeah.
And I think about so we're also in the animal kingdom, right? So it's like that had to have a benefit on us too. And now there was a lot of depression and anxiety and stuff, but I think also there was a lot of positive.
And a lot of people would label it fear, but it's just mental anxiety. It gets into breath work and stuff like that, where a lot of people get into what they call fear. They get into a sympathetic nervous system because they're shortened breath and stuff, because they haven't learned how to breathe. They're going to businesses and because they have some sort of presentation or something to do, there's fear, and it's mental anxiety wrapped around that, and all this stuff comes from the perspective that we give it. Everything has the weight that I give it. Everything that I'm looking at is looking through a lens that I'm putting it through. Everything that I learned from when I was born, I learned from somebody else. I didn't even know I was born until somebody told me that.
What's your take on this epiphany you had of, life isn't just inflicting me with all these things, but I have some responsibility in what's happening. You said that earlier.
Yeah, that's kind of where the perspective change came. That's where I changed out a pair of glasses for a new pair of glasses. I went to the spiritual optometrist, and he just kind of, is this right, kind of switched it up.
It feels so good to get a new pair of glasses.
Yeah, and I could see, I'm like, has this been around the whole time?
The clarity.
And I'm like, oh my God. And how can I keep opening that aperture so that I can start taking in more, so I can start learning more, so I can start to see other things and start to step into other people's shoes, to not be so selfish about everything, so I can start to understand how some of my behavior felt in somebody else's place, and to sit there for a little bit and understand that they're asleep like I am to the spiritual thing, and that yes, I'm disturbed because I don't like to be disturbed when I'm sleeping, and they're also disturbed by my behavior because they're asleep too. How can I get them to wake up? Do they even want to be woke up?
Yeah,
some people go through life just asleep, and marry in their sleep, buy cars in their sleep, work in their sleep, and die in their sleep. The
Walking Dead.
Yeah, and you see them all the time. It's like, they're in a groove, with the samsara.
It's a cozy place to be.
Yeah.
It's a cozy place to be is in rest.
Yeah.
And I feel like I put myself into a nap the past 2 years.
Yeah.
I went really hard, like at the solar eclipse in 2016, and just had like huge growth, lots of wild experiences. It was just a lot to grow through and integrate. And moving back to the city 2 years ago, I just kind of like, I don't want to talk to anybody philosophical. I mean, this is like a breakthrough for me, Jimmy. Yeah. I'm just giving you context because you really don't know. But like, I have not wanted to talk religion, spirituality, nothing for 2 years. And it's very abnormal for me, but I just needed to like rest. And so moving back to the city, buying a television, just doing the mundane thing. I mean, going to the gym is not a mundane thing, but it was a huge space filler.
Yeah.
And just turning my mind off and getting into my body. And, you know, I'm coming out of that rest period.
Yeah.
But it's definitely given me way more compassion to those we judge who are asleep, you know, in the materialism or whatever. Because I'm thinking, yeah, it's tough to be awake and sleep is so good.
Yeah.
And it is on someone else's like accord. Like when they want to open one eye or in two eyes.
Yeah. And I can only give my testimony of where I'm at. I can't ever give any, you know, it can be learned, it can't be taught.
Mm-hmm.
I can't give you this spiritual epiphany. I can't give you until you bottom out or get to a situation or a person or a place that you can't manage and you need to reach for help.
Well, and Jimmy, don't we know, like, when the student is ready, the teacher appears?
Exactly.
You know, I mean, you have a wonderful string of teachers and communities that just kept opening up. And I think that's, like, always how it's been for me.
Yeah.
Is, like, I kind of reached the lessons or the sort of semester I'm on. I kind of graduate, and then I'm, like, ready for the next.
You plateau out, and then where am I going from here?
Yeah.
You know,
something comes along, introduces a new language, a new concept. Yeah, and I haven't wanted anything new. I'm like, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to learn, like, you know. And I'm curious now, like, where I'm gonna head now that I'm kind of like back online or back awake, and just even activating this space of wanting to bring wonderful guests on and actually talk about things again.
Yeah,
it's like, where is this headed? Where am I headed? Where is this next chapter for me? I don't know, but
yeah, and just the conversations and the connection with other people, and some of the stuff that we're exploring that may have been in their heads that, you know, I don't know where to get information on this. I don't know what books to read. Am I going into self-help, and is self-help really helping self at all?
Right.
You know, it's just not another book. I mean, how much more can I get in the now? Is you selling another book me getting more into the now? But is it the now, or was I in the now before, and now you needed a second book? You know, even when we get into that spiritual materialism,
you have to climb the rungs of the ladder.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't even know you're already on the ladder.
Man, yeah, it's the whole grace and humility piece of, you know, like watching different people at different stages of their awakening or their journey. Like, oh yeah, okay, I remember that lesson I was on or that class I was on, and you know, you kind of patiently sit beside people or even the culture or the society.
Yeah, and hold some space
come
for
along,
them.
Come along. Like that whole now thing just really was funny to me, because does another book pull me more into the now?
Yeah. How much further can I get into it? Isn't this happening right now?
And what do I do in the now?
and even if I'm thinking about the future, it is now while I'm thinking about the future, or I'm thinking about the past.
Unravel it all.
Yeah. Whether I'm going back to movies I already know the end to, trying to think, you know, adding special effects, thinking that the ending's going to be a little bit different. It's not. I'm ruminating, going over some stuff, maybe a little dabbling of resentment in there that I may have to write about, and kind of see what my part was in it, you know.
You gave me a list of things I wanted to read, but I'm recording on my phone.
Yeah.
You gave me a list of different topics that you'd want to discuss, and it was like such an eclectic list. I wanted to read it.
Yeah, I got it right here.
Yeah. So, yeah, Jimmy invited himself on this situation.
As most things I do.
Great.
So.
Yeah, open the door for yourself. I said, sure thing. What do you have in mind? And he said, we could go a lot of ways. I love to talk about spirituality, religion, the word God, God, meditation, sobriety, non-duality, the human condition, the Pearl Street Society, the Boomerang Factory, the quantum, nutrition, movement as medicine, health and wellness coaching, Tyler Durden, everyone's own Project Mayhem, what is happiness, what is success, 24 and more, 24 and before, anything and everything. Yeah, half of that I understand. Some of it's like a new thing to me. But one thing that I think of this list stuck out to me the most, or kind of piqued my interest, was the word, quote, God, unquote.
Yeah.
And I actually had thought that I had said something to you. I thought that was a direct kind of like an inside joke or something, because for years, for my part of my journey to unprogram this like false concept of God that I felt was kind of programmed into me, I would only say God to like offset this triggering of the sound concept in my mind. If I say God, then it brings up all this stuff. Or if I said God, it brings up all this stuff in someone else. So to kind of like sidestep it, I would just say, oh, God, God.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I say that to people. So I wasn't sure if we had gotten to a quick conversation where I said that and you were like, let's talk about.
No, it's just something that I go over a lot of times.
Okay.
It brings up, I mean, really resonates with some people, like poorly, you know. And I don't think that they're atheist in the way that they don't believe that there's a God, but it's the teachings that they grew up with, the things that were, you know, that they learned and stuff. And it's somebody's interpretation of God that they took on as their own, a concept and stuff. And what it talks about in here, the Pearl Street Society, which is a meeting that I have, which is, we call it an institution of higher unlearning, where there are no graduates, so there are plenty of degrees, and that set aside prayer, you know, talking about all those different names for what God is. God, the word, those three little letters,
which spelled backwards is dog.
Yeah, and then I'm going to say, but yeah, it's just a placeholder for the power. What's behind that thing? But it brings up so many things, because these concepts, this structure, this scaffolding that's been built up around our false self, other people's ideas, and I don't even know if they're mine, because I haven't explored long enough. You know, I've got all these packages in the attic, and I can go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist and they can relabel all this stuff, make it pretty up in the attic. But I need to get rid of some of this stuff that isn't mine. And I need to start understanding, what do I really believe? You know, what do I have? You know, I have a thing with faith that sounds a little bit too religious for me. I like the word trust. When I can start to trust in that the universe has my back.
Okay. I'm discovering that you're kind of a word guy like me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm interested in this offsetting faith to trust.
Yeah.
What's
because I know what trust is. If I trust somebody,
right,
I'm not thinking about it again.
Okay.
I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it getting done.
Now contrast that with the word faith.
With faith, because just me growing up, it came from a lot of religious. It came from Baptist churches and stuff, where I see people acting criminally all week and then being in the front rows of church, being dressed up and glad handing everybody, talking about how we're, you know, so religious.
And that's called faith. That's what we call faith. Yeah. I see that.
And people would call it different people's faith, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and trust is much more like skinny and streamlined and direct and more focused. Okay.
If I'm in fear, I'm not trusting that God or the universe, or because maybe something that's happening around me doesn't look the way I think it should look, that it's wrong.
So I have a funny relationship to the word trust.
Yeah.
Called trust issues.
Uh-huh.
No. Well, I mean, we all have trust issues, but you know, I've been kind of investigating this concept or this notion of trust, probably because so many things in my life have shifted or betrayed my trust, right? Even things, you know, I've built in construction or whatever. I'm thinking more of like around my bee farm and stuff,
Uh-huh.
things fall over and you're like, shoot, I trusted, this bee stand to work, and the wind came and it blew it over, whatever. And then you get into relationships where, are you going to show up at this time, or can you take care of these things, and someone doesn't, right?
Somebody lets you down.
Yeah, somebody breaks your confidence. Oh.
Did we run out of power?
Yeah. Bro. It's so fun to talk to you, but it's I've never done this before. Is there batteries over? No, they're behind you, actually, on the couch. But let's just assume it gave me the last word.
Okay.
Which I think was like, I have trust issues.
Yes.
It's like, maybe I shouldn't talk about this. No, but this concept of trust, and it's only because you were messing with the word faith and then using trust. I kind of like when people are intentional about language to make sure that they're representing what they're feeling and what they're thinking and just speaking accurately. So yeah, this trust concept is like when someone says, I don't trust you, or I'm like, I don't trust that person, I'm always like, well, what do I have of yours to trust? Mm-hmm. And you can certainly like break down practical things. But it's just kind of, I guess at a fundamental level, I don't feel like anything can be trusted.
Yeah.
And I think that's the truth.
Yeah.
And it's like really kind of edgy, like don't trust no one, don't trust anything. And like I kind of always rejected that sort of anarchy, kind of like punk rock, like feel, or even like a gangster type feel, like don't trust nobody. And I'm like, no, I trust everybody. And I've always practiced that. And I'm a very trusting person. However, it's like natural disasters and, the change of business, the change of economy. I mean, how many people have lived life and things have shifted under their feet? Divorce, a relationship.
That's the only thing permanent is change.
Yeah, it did. Okay, so then that's where I'm at with trust. Is like that. I guess I'm trying to assess where that, where to feel or put that concept. Because in some ways I've grown to not trust anything. Mm-hmm. And maybe right now I'm kind of realizing, is it more in this existential space where I'm like up here, like not trusting anything, but you have to enact in the world.
Yeah.
And so it's like we're sitting on the chair, I'm trusting that, things are going to be there. But where are you at with trust? I know you said in relation to the higher power, because we were talking about GOD.
The energy that's all around me. Generally, if negative things are happening, it's a projection of what I'm thinking. I generally bring on a lot of the things through worry and other things. Worry is kind of like praying for things that you don't want.
No, this is a good point. And then so this is where I'm getting at is, so then if someone breaks my trust, mm-hmm. what I've come to believe or understand is that it's me.
Well, you had a contract that you may not have expressed to them.
Yeah.
And they broke the contract.
Yeah.
But you may not have put down the terms or anything like that. But in your mind, they broke your trust. In their mind, they just made a mistake.
They just made a mistake. Well, that's one angle of it. The other angle of it is I wanted shift and change. Uh-huh. And something in me actually wanted a break in my contract with you. Rather than doing it directly, it's like emerged indirectly.
Yeah. And now I have a situation that I can use to break from you.
To shift. Yeah. And rather than being the victim of it, like, oh, you broke my trust and now I'm, this victim. But it's like, well, something in my vibration or my frequency wasn't resonating with this situation anymore, whether it be a job or, a relationship. And therefore it broke. And it's not that my trust wasn't real in them or that they broke my trust. It's that things shifted. And I think that's what's kind of blown up this concept of trust is I don't believe that the concept of trust is real because things are actually just always shifting And I think we, like, from this human perspective, like, put onto it these trust concepts. Well, if there was a contract, you broke it. But I guess for me, in recent years, I've stepped back and just seen it all as shifting parts. And I can throw, like, the grid of trust, the trust concept and dynamic on it. But I feel like that always puts me in a victim place.
Yeah. Well,
and I don't like that.
Yeah, but it's when I start to put somebody on a pedestal. Yeah. And I start to not understand like that they're selfish and their self-interest comes first. And definitely in a relationship. And I'm thinking this relationship is, you know, to talk about my marriage, my ideas of marriage, you know, I thought marriage was forever, till death do we part, you know, real men don't get divorces. If I'm a good husband, a good provider, divorces don't happen. You know, how does this do to a family? You know, what happens to the husband when there's no more wife? I have to grieve the husband. I have to understand that part of the identity that was the husband has passed away, and I've got to have a ceremony. I've got to grieve that part of me that left, and now I have to see what life looks like from this different perspective. You know, I have a different viewing platform at that point because I'm no longer a husband. Now I'm a single parent, divorced, have to co-parent. You know, that's a much different life. Now do I go back into dating? Do I allow people to meet my children? I'm like, what does that look like? Are these people going to come and go? You know,
the divorcee path.
Yeah. Am I bringing in rent-a-moms for a little bit so that they can babysit so that I can do my work and stuff like, you know, it was a whole different dynamic that I had to step into. And it was a complete change, but I didn't understand that I had to grieve the husband because I thought, you know, first 10 years, you know, maybe you know, we're just learning how to argue, you know, maybe that's why we're not, I to tell you the truth, I really didn't like my then wife, you know, all that.
How would you reword that?
How would I reword it? Me and her were not compatible. You know, we got together. We were,
and you don't like things that are not compatible.
We just didn't get along once it got.
Sure.
You know, she had grown up much different than I had. She had
that was
housekeepers and stuff like this. So we're trying to maintain a house. I'm working, being the provider.
Right.
I had expectations that maybe she'd clean up or maybe have dinner cooked or something like that.
Yeah.
But some of that stuff didn't matter to her, and she had always had money. So our money coming in, it wasn't budgeted, or so it was.
There's so many variables when two lives come together. I call marriage or relationships anymore. I just call it culture clash.
Yeah.
And I don't think we think of it like that. We're like, oh, if you go to Asia, you know, or, you know, it's like, no, culture clash is when two human beings try to live life together because it's like completely different cultures. Even if your cultures are similar, it's like there's so many variables of differences. And really, it's like how you would go to another country and how you behave of acclimating to other cultures or your ability to learn or adapt is really what relationship endurance I think is really about. And you may just not like a culture, you know, or things, or you may miss, you know, your culture, and that's fine. We were talking about trust and then God, and you had shifted faith and trust, and you were talking about trust and I think the higher power, trust in the power.
And have I ever been in lack?
Dude, that's so deep.
You know, I've always been provided for.
That's so deep.
At such a level, even when it didn't look the way that I thought it should look.
Yeah.
A lot of it came down to my preferences. According to whose preferences is God loving me?
That's right.
You know, or do I have faith in the universe is going to look out for me? It has my back, that my bills are going to be paid, that, you know, that food's going to be on the table.
Yeah.
And it's when I get into lack and when I start to worry, when I start to get into fear, that I stop trusting and I start doing things. I usually mess things up more when I start. If you had a bucket and it had sediment in it, and you wanted to see down to the bottom, would you keep stirring it up to clear up the water?
Man.
Or would you let it all settle and just kind of...
I have been through those lessons. I'm like in that lesson right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like in a tightrope
Yeah.
walk of trust of resources and scarcity, and like reminding myself I've always had opportunities. I've always had the next step present itself. And like, this is like a huge faith step or trust step. Is like, is this the next step? Because don't want to stir the bucket of sediment again.
Yeah.
You know, I need to, so I'm finding that balance of like being patient each day. And I'll get into those details another time, but
quit picking at it. It'll heal.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think that's so real. But for me, just really tuning in of when, you know, I kind of describe it using an analogy of kayaking down the river. Like there's points where you need to get your row out and you need to paddle.
Yeah.
And there's points where you let the current take you.
Yeah.
And me and my friends often kind of use that analogy. It's like, is this the time where you need to move, or is this the
point? Or it's
point?
a co-creation.
Yeah, co-creation, or is this the point where you actually are letting the current flow? And I feel like in a sort of mix of that right now, but
yeah. And like I was talking about, opening your aperture, you know, am I really seeing the opportunities that are coming, or is my focus so narrowed that it has to look this way, or money only comes from these directions?
Yeah, maybe our last concept we could get into for today is like, what is your concept of the higher power, the God? How would you explain that?
How would I explain?
Your Jimmy.
Yeah, I call it the space between. That is what I call it, because everything is on the same field. We're in what one of the books that I read, that I go through for 12-step recovery, says, see where religious people are right. Not that they are right. See where they are right and make use of what they offer. And using the things that I see in there, as Jesus taught, to, you know, that he is every man, that what he is capable, you are capable of. You are also the Son of God. I am also the Son of God. These things, he was in a minority of one. What he was proclaiming the good news. They didn't crucify him because he was proclaiming the good news. They crucified him because it was new, because it was different. He was in a minority of one. He's telling these things, and it was anti-establishment. You know, it wasn't because of these things. It's strange that Romans who would gather up Christianity after, you know, being the people who perpetrated this, you know, putting him up on.
You can't beat him, join him was that approach. But yeah,
I mean, it's just. I see that, you know, through Christ, through Krishna, through these different things. They're just different manifestations of the same thing. Through Buddha, it's the possibility that we all have, and we're closed off from it because we're not connected to other people. We start thinking that we have to work in scorecards, and it's about what I'm getting, not what I'm giving out. But generally, what I'm giving out, I'm getting back tenfold. If I'm giving out love, I'm not worried about how much love I'm getting, because I'm putting out that love. And I can start to love people in a different way, because I had the wrong concept of love for the longest time. You know, I thought it was this codependency, and you had to love me, and then it was a keeping score. Well, I did all this for you, and now I only have I only have 4 points right now. And, you know, when's this love going to come back to me, rather than seeing it? And I don't think I even knew how to love until I had a child, you know, until having that first child. I think I was so, like, I don't know if it was a alcoholic thing. You were saying, like, your dad was, my father was bad alcoholic, my sister's extremely bad as well. I saw these things kind of.
And I don't think it's that we're alcoholics, right? That's just our closest language. I think that we're the archetype.
Yeah.
Of our ancestors in the past who would explore more shamanic, mind-altering practices through, you know.
And some people get stuck in that. I never So we have meetings and stuff, and people will say, "Hi, my name's this, and I am." I never say I am. I say I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic.
Whoa. Say that again?
I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic.
Whoa. And you say that in groups?
Yes.
Whoa. The first time I went to AA was my girlfriend in my early 20s. She had to go. And
she was on papers?
No.
Court appointed?
I don't think so. I meant she had to go, like, it was a problem.
Yeah.
So she had to take herself there.
Like her family decided it was a problem. She decided it was a problem.
She decided,
and she knew enough to.
Maybe I decided.
You decided.
Maybe I decided. Maybe we decided.
We got to go to a church basement and get you right.
Jeez. Well, I got invited, and maybe it was anyhow. So I show up, and it was my first time. And I'm maybe 21, so I had just restarted drinking craft beer and thought I was cool. Cool as in
hip, slick, and cool.
Cool as in like good from the problem of alcoholism. Yeah. And so they're going around, and I'm like, well, I'm Miles and I'm not an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize the context of saying that in a group, and so I was like, wait a minute. I was like, no, what I mean is I'm with her, supporting her being here.
Yeah.
Not that I'm in denial. Yeah. The irony, but anyway, so that's how you introduce yourself, and how is that received?
Usually it's a lot more than that too. It's I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic, and the world is a much better place because of that.
Yeah.
Well, and and I explain that to a lot of people, because a lot of people recovered and recovery. It says in the book, these are many hundred that have recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body, a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So it seemed like it was hopeless, and you have recovered from that dog chasing its tail the whole time. But I don't want to reemphasize the alcoholism, that was just something that exacerbated something inside of me, that I have an allergic reaction to it. That is not me. I'm not depressed. I can have depression, but I'm not depressed. If I start to associate and start to call myself that, then those words start to weigh a little bit heavy on me. I may as well grow a leg on my back so it'll be easier to kick myself in the ass.
Yeah, it's like that.
Yeah. And so, and I explain it to people, and they're like, well, it doesn't come off pompous when you say it. There's some people that it comes off a little bit sideways, and
it's a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a journey to find your center in that.
Yeah, the ED, a lot of people have an issue with that because they think that they're cured, and everything, that there's no cure to anything. It's a process, and a lot of people just want relief anyway. I just need to go to this meeting, and now I'll see people that go to meetings in order to get to the next meeting, and they're white knuckling it to the next meeting so that I can be okay. And it's not having this spiritual thing where somebody's putting, like my sponsor said, I don't want your dependency to be on me. I want to put your hand in God's hand.
Yeah.
And that was the spiritual trip that I had, and I use God because it's easy to say, but it's, not. Thomas Merton talks about this.
I like Thomas Merton.
Christian mystic says, to speak about God, silence makes more sense, but words is all we have. And so all we are is really using fingers to point at the moon. And people get stuck on the finger rather than where it's pointed to. And a lot of times when we talk about God, people just turn off immediately.
Yeah.
And it's not about the God thing, it's the power. It's this thing that if you can't understand that there's something greater going on, that you're just put on here for a little bit, and it's just a blip so that you can drink Dr. Peppers and make an aluminum recycling bin, and watch the latest television bitch about how Game of Thrones ended, and go to Starbucks as much as you can. Just wait for pumpkin spice to come back.
But certainly that is another form and incarnation of God, It's to experience those things.
I think that it is all encompassing, that we're inside of this. That's why we don't have any words to describe outside of. There's a book that that I love that not a whole lot of people can read because it is just deep. It's called Perfect Brilliant Stillness.
Perfect Brilliant Stillness. Who's this author?
This guy has only written one book.
Okay.
Did one running of the book. So to get a book that's on the back says 1995, it'll cost you about $80 to get it, and it'll probably have underlines in it and stuff.
Oh, wow.
He's a carpenter in Vermont.
Okay.
Went to the jungles, South America, to find himself, and was warned by a bunch of people that he'd die if he went. And he said, well, the David thing did die. His name's David Kars. He went, had a Kundalini experience, and lost his sense of self, but didn't have any of the spiritual seeking to have any language for it. So he started to go into satsangs and other things to get this language around it. Didn't understand what was going on. Went to India, studied under a bunch of gurus and stuff, and started to understand, this non-dual thing. This David thing was just consciousness, flowing out, and he was just one of the best parts of his book. He talks about the flute never takes a bow. It's not me doing it. I'm just the flute. The magician is playing the music.
Sure.
So
yeah, the genius, as the Greeks had it.
Yeah.
You had a genius. It wasn't that you were a genius.
Yeah.
It was a sort of
a
divinity.
Download. Yeah.
A download. Yes, a divinity inhabiting you.
Yeah. Or like you were talking about grace. It's an unwarranted gift, But I start to take credit for it, and I start to, the sound of one hand clapping is me patting myself on the back.
Yeah, I've had an interesting journey with this sort of aspect in relation to myself. Of course, my ego can say like, "Oh, Miles Allen is this entity or this personality that I am."
Yeah.
And through seeing so many things happen before my eyes, and just being guided by my path, which I know I cannot be orchestrating all of this.
Yeah.
It's been really wild and really wonderful.
Yeah.
And, just the different ways I want to serve or give back to people or share compassion, is even a wonderful thing for me to be witness to.
Yeah.
And it's like, I am this Miles Allen thing that's happening.
Yeah.
These gifts that, is it my like DNA coding? Is it, the way I was raised? Is it my own free will to will myself into these things in this way? But it's certainly been helpful to, kind of stand back from yourself.
Yeah.
And
be the witness.
Yeah, be the witness and see like, oh man, it's a grace to be like this, and a grace to inhabit and honor. And it's definitely like been a huge journey of deep humility.
Yeah. Self observation rather than self absorption.
A little bit of both, but a little bit of both. Definitely, a healthy amount of self love. Yeah. Geez, it's a journey to feel confident and like honor yourself or even respect. And I think a big piece of the recovery journey has got to be a coming to a place where you are respecting your body and respecting your mind and your soul. And I think so much patterns of behavior where we, are self-destructive because you're lacking that like love that you have for your child. I mean, it's an intense love to nurture and keep something healthy. And I think a lot of people who fall into addicts or bad behaviors, like we're lacking that inner parent that would fight for your good. And, you can maybe speak to it more than I could, but it seems that there's that recovery of the inner parent, to your inner child, to say, we deserve a better life. You have better gifts. You're more intelligent than this to be, strung out all the time and stuff like that.
Yeah. And to be numb to what's going on, the perfect brilliance that's unfolding in front of me, every new moment, creations at this minute right here. And am I numb to that? And what am I trying to escape from? Where am I going to escape to? If you're trying suicide through alcohol, it's going to take a long time. But every time I went to alcohol, it came to the same 3 parking spots. It was jails, institutions, or death. Those were the only parking spots that would show up anywhere that I went. So I had to start to decide. And I didn't get so far. Like, I probably could have qualified much earlier, like you did. And I know a lot of people got sober really young, and I'm like, you just didn't try hard enough. Like, how do you even know? But people just know, and I could have qualified for it. But like I said, I had brief areas of sobriety where the heat got on a little bit too much at one house, and I might move over to marijuana for a little bit. I went to art school, painting and stuff like that. I mean, it's low wreckage when you can only drive 20 miles an hour because you're
right.
you don't even know how to drive.
Yeah.
And painting, being in art school just added to that, and then I'm, dabbling in other things where I'm trying to open my mind a little bit more, cleanse the walls of perception, start dabbling into, some man-made stuff that came from mold off of rye, and then, into ketamine, into ecstasy, cocaine, these other things,
all the flavors of the rainbow.
Yeah, and I call them vacation hounds, because I could go over here and live for a little bit. I could go over here if it got a little bit too hot in this one spot, you just go to another house for a little bit.
It's like, in one way, it's like to the extreme that our culture and society and world is aching and hurting and stressed and just anguished, is to the extreme that these vacation home drugs are being consumed. And so it's like, if we have a pandemic of overdoses and drug use, it's like, well, that's directly correlated. I mean, that is a symptom of the pain that is needing to be escaped.
Well, and people aren't giving you the proper medicine to do that. We're trying to give you a quick fix because people want relief, not a cure. They don't want to eat healthy. They don't want to exercise every day. I just give me the pill and make it happen, and then I'll be out of your hair for a little bit until I need to come back next month and get the next pills or whatever. But and then the big pharma just keeps growing and growing. Even just I almost went off onto another.
Well, a short-term fix is certainly helpful at points in time. But it's like, if your short-term fix becomes the constant, like, you really don't budge an inch forward. And maybe staying in the same spot feels really safe. And the bravery to want to proceed forward.
And I think when I got into it was growth oriented, because I didn't understand the world, how it was constructed. I didn't understand this materialism. I didn't understand doing these jobs to get this. When I'm out skateboarding and I see people making tons of money from that, and they're happy and they're doing work whenever they want to work, and how does that land on some people? But some people are in this drone of got to get up in the morning and
skateboarding. That's right. You got big into skateboarding, or were a big skateboarder, or continue to.
I rode for some companies and
talk about that.
And I when I was very young, I was very athletically gifted. So that was just one of the things. I played golf. I played junior PGA. Did stuff before I was 10, 11 years old, playing, and that was something that was driven by my father. Would give me accolades for things that I did athletically, because he didn't have the athletic ability that I did. And I played all sports and did this stuff, and then I got into skateboarding, which I thought was pretty cool. It was not cool at the time. Skateboarding was not a crime, stickers and stuff. And I chose that over regular sports, and my dad kind of disassociated himself with me. My mother kind of grasped to that, and
she thought skateboarding was cool.
Yeah, she helped me with the skateboard shop, with the skateboard park. We had a Rampage skateboard park.
Mean, growing up, people either understood skateboarding or they didn't.
Yeah.
It was a very divisive activity.
My dad thought it was a waste of time. If you're this athletically gifted, why are you not doing a sport that could make you money? And he didn't understand it at all. He didn't grow up with it. So, he's just seeing these hoodlums, that are messing up curbs and hand railings and stuff, that making, we had this half pipe in somebody else's yard that
it was wild. It took over. My older brothers were really into skating and their friends, and I dabbled a little bit, but balancing on that board wasn't my thing at the time. But
I'd skated with some people that were really, really good that ended up, really, really big. I was here in the Midwest. I was up in Chicago, so I couple of people that have done MTV shows and stuff, and are getting Ferraris and stuff.
The good old days,
but that wasn't my path. I went from that, hurt myself, and then went to immediately as soon as I graduated high school, went into college, then went down to art college. So I was in Savannah, Georgia.
Dude.
So I didn't even spend that much time with my family before, and as soon as I had a chance to leave, I was gone. I was kind of raised by wolves,
Jimmy, man. Well, we've certainly proved that we can talk about anything and everything.
Yeah.
Which the paragraph you gave me of the list was a wide scope, and I love talking to thinkers like that because it's just fun to shoot through reality and just pass things back and forth. So we'll definitely
stick off the bottle rocket and just let it go wherever it's gonna go.
Yes, that's what this episode will be called. That's great. Well, let's have many more talks.
Absolutely,
because we touched on a lot of things I wanted to dive into. Is let's just keep the current moving. But this is a good time.
And I'm like a BB in a mailbox. I'll start talking about something else and go over here, and it's just like ting, 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 ting.
I'm quite that way as well. I do have a linear mind and conversation as well, but I think it's fun to kind of, pull different things together and see how the conversation weaves, and you get this sort of fabric. And,
yeah,
it's good.
The tapestry, it looks like a mess on the back, but when you flip it over, it's beautiful. That's where the pattern comes out.
That's exactly how I describe my conversations. Yeah. Very good. Right on, man.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Let's do this again, man.
Okay. Sounds good.
I told you I could talk.
Man. Yeah. I start to